अपना टाइम आएगा, उठ जा अपनी राख से दूर जा तलाश में, पर्वत एक परवाने की आसमां भी सर उठाएगा, आएगा अपना टाइम आएगा, मेरे जैसा शाना लाला तुझे ना मिल पाएगा, ये शब्दों का ज्वाला मेरी बेड़ियां पिघलाएगा, जितना तूने बोया है तू उतना ही तो खाएगा, ऐसा मेरा ख्वाब है जो डर को भी सताएगा, सुनना मेरा ख्वाब अब कैसे तू दफनाएगा, अब हौसले से जीने दे, अब खौफ नहीं है सीने में, हर रास्तों को चीरेंगे, हम कामयाबी छीनेंगे, सब कुछ मिला पसीने से, मतलब बड़ा जीने में, क्यों? क्योंकि अपना टाइम आएगा, तू नंगा ही तो आया है, क्या घंटा लेकर जाएगा, घंटा लेकर जाएगा, क्योंकि अपना टाइम आएगा, अपना टाइम आएगा, नंगा ही तो आया है, क्या घंटा लेकर जाएगा, कौन बोला, क्योंकि अपना टाइम आएगा, अपना टाइम आएगा, नंगा ही तो आया है, क्या घंटा लेकर जाएगा।
Hello, yo plebs. Welcome to another episode of Bob Radio. Bob stands for Build on Bitcoin, where we talk to Bitcoin builders from around the globe. This is episode 12. And with us, we have a special guest, another special guest, Mr. Raj Maitra. Currently from BDK Development, a Spiral-sponsored project, and most recently, a Bitcoin Development Academy in India called Bitshala. Welcome, Raj. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Wow, I saw you smile. So, I think I caught you off guard with the Bitshala introduction.
Yes,
so
you
good.
did.
I'm glad I have that effect on people. So, all right, the way we get started is, Starvin, you want to get us started?
Raj, we're gonna start with like some rapid fire questions. You're supposed to answer them as fast as lightning.
Okay.
Don't
sounds
overthink
fun.
them too much.
Okay, cool.
All right, first one. Favorite place in India?
Goa.
Second one. If you had all the Bitcoin in the world, what would you do?
Work on Bitcoin.
Third one. When you are not coding, you are
Thinking about code, thinking about how to teach people code, thinking about how to explain code, thinking about what new code should exist.
fourth. Best way to orange peel someone?
Ah, that's a tough one. I don't know, like let them be and let them see the pain of the world with fiat economy by themselves, and when they're ready, give them the pill. Like don't force the pill, don't give the pill before they're ready, but be ready with the pill, and you'll know when they're ready, and when they're ready, they just boom, dose it.
Awesome. Last one. Why not Bitcoin?
Why not Bitcoin? Sorry, I didn't get it.
No one does. That's why I like this question. Yeah. Why
Okay.
not Bitcoin? Any argument?
Not really. Like there is really no easy reason to ignore Bitcoin once you see what it does. Thousands of reasons why Bitcoin. Why not Bitcoin? I don't know. I don't have any reason.
Perfect answer, man. All right. Thanks for the answers. I'll pass the mic back to Piccolo, and we proceed.
All right. Cool. Okay. You actually did answer that in a lightning format. Some of our guests actually would think quite long about it. So good job there.
Thank you.
The next section of our show, we focus on your personal journey and your personal philosophy. So usually we start off by asking, Raj, who are you and what is your orange pill journey?
Okay. So I'm Raj, formerly Rajarshi Maitra from India. And I started in Bitcoin in 2017. I found about it quite via an accident while I was like doing my day job. I was like working as a civil engineer, and I was like exploring different subject as my interest was flowing around. Then suddenly one day, crypto ad pop-up came up in Facebook, and that was like the shittiest cryptocurrencies that can possibly exist. It's a bucket of different tokens and they adjust the weights of those things, and they issue another ERC20 token on top of that bucket. And I was like so bored. I didn't know what to do. I was bored of watching Netflix. I was bored of watching, like, scrolling into Facebook and like say, hey, this is something cool. And that was like the start of the 2017 bull market around October. And because I was so bored, I was like, yeah, like, it looks shady, looks shitty. I don't even understand what a cryptocurrency is. And but I decided to take a look in anyway. And I was scouting and like figuring out how to get this token, how to, like, they have a website, they have a place where you have to put in a BTC, Ethereum, or a Litecoin address of a certain amount. First you have to get the BTC, ETH, or a Litecoin from somewhere, and then you have to set up a MetaMask wallet, and they will transfer the ERC20 token over there. So I like barely understood any of this part, and I was like scouring through, and in their landing page they had this this Bitcoin address bar, right? You have to send the Bitcoin to their address, and that also had three different addresses you can send to. You can either send a Bitcoin, either send a Litecoin, or ETH. And the curious thing was, every time I was refreshing the page, the address was changing, and that like was felt like weird. Like, I understood, like, they explained the address as their bank account. It's like correspondingly as you have your bank account number, but you never see your bank account number change like that at every refresh. And then if your bank account number changes at every refresh, how do they know like which account I sent the money to? And I was like wondering this kind of question, and that got me started into the rabbit hole. And then I landed into Antonov's page on YouTube, where he was talking about this Bitcoin in general. I was scouring through the whole process. I got Bitcoin in some very early days wallet. The wallet doesn't exist anymore, and went through the whole process. And within few weeks, around 1.5 months, I realized like it's way more than what I initially thought it was. And that feeling kind of like stayed on for next 6-7 months, where like I was like, as I'm exploring new things and new things about this subject, I was like, wow, like this is beyond like what I was like looking for. I was looking for like 5 minutes or 6 minutes of engagement. And then that process never actually stopped. It just kept going and going. At initial days, I wasn't thinking of it as my career. I was like mostly taking it up as a hobby, something that I'm interested in. I found the Bitcoin Twitter space. I found other people who were talking about it. I started engaging in the conversation. I started studying up just to understand this thing better and better. So along this journey, somewhere 2.5 years down the road, um mid of 2019, had covered like few basic grounds around cryptography, economics, Bitcoin in general, how it works, the concepts. And I was wondering, maybe I should like learn to code just to understand Bitcoin better. And that started my journey of
Oh,
like learning.
wait. Before you move on.
Mhm.
So you started learning to code in 2019.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
End
So
of
so you
2019.
yeah, I heard this story before, but again, you skipped that whole part of your life, man. I mean, what did you kind of do before learning to code? I mean, what was like your skill set? You don't have to dox
Okay.
yourself and tell us specific things, but
Yeah,
what were you
yeah,
like a
before.
finance guy, or what were you
Yeah,
before became
yeah.
becoming a
I
developer?
was a I was an engineer. I'm trained in engineering, civil engineering, and then I specialized in offshore structural engineering. It's like the engineering that is needed for designing the oil and gas platforms that they place in the middle of the oceans and stuff. So
Oh, sure. Yeah.
yeah, I was working as a like structural engineer professional in a company at that
Hmm.
time, and that was like that was supposed to be my career path. And so yeah, basically before learning to code, I was like doing my day job, like being a civil engineer, being a structural engineer, and being in that world. And
Right.
Bitcoin was something that I do after coming from the office.
Cool. All right. Okay, carry on. Wow. See, you skipped a big part, man. So actually,
Yeah.
in addition to helping teach people learning how to code, how to do Bitcoin CLI. You can also like land on an offshore platform and tell people to fix their structures if
Yeah,
it's gonna blow
yeah.
up, right? We can create. Okay, maybe offshore Bitcoin Citadel can happen, man. You can be our resident structural engineer.
Yeah,
Anyway,
totally. And when I was like when there was an overlap between my offshore structural engineering journey and Bitcoin, I was like, damn, this place is like this kind of things are like very useful for Bitcoin mining, because in offshore platforms you have like a very basic processing platform, and in that processing platform there are some flared gases, and there is nothing you can do about that flared gas in the middle of the ocean, right? You cannot like even if you try to like transfer it into heat and electricity, it's gonna cost a lot to transfer that electricity
yep.
somewhere else. But Bitcoin mining makes a lot of sense. Like if you have like a mining setup over there with a satellite internet connection, and then boom, you can transform that energy into like sats in the middle of ocean. And that was like the first mind-blowing idea I had from there. But
Hey,
eventually like
it's
they
still
are
a good
doing it.
idea. It's still a
Yeah,
good idea, and they're already
yeah,
doing it.
they're already
But
doing it. Yeah.
okay, the next time we see each other, definitely that's put a pin on it. I'm definitely interested in going down that rabbit hole.
Cool.
Okay,
Yeah,
keep going,
yeah.
sir.
Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So 2019, I was like at the end of 2019, I started to code. Then the pandemic happened 2020, and that kind of like boosted the whole process for me, because suddenly I got free from 3 hours of commute every day. I didn't have to go to office. And at the same time, like I could work from anywhere, and I used that opportunity to like pay more focused attention on Bitcoin related development. And I'd like get an assignment from office. If it takes like 10 hours, I would say like it's gonna take 20 hours, and I will finish it in 6 hours and put the rest of the 14 hours in Bitcoin. And that got me like boosted a lot. And
Man, that's an engineering trick called Slack, right? Raj, you need to
yeah,
put Slack into the whole
yes,
thing. Yep.
yes,
Okay, I
yes.
I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah. And then on 2020, I made my first very minute small commit to Bitcoin Core. That was like my first ever GitHub commit ever. Like I didn't had a GitHub account before that, and I didn't knew how to create a pull request and all these things, but I wanted to try it anyway. And I was playing around with Bitcoin Core, and I found like there is certain like small fix that you can do in the test framework, and it's all Python code. So I made a small commit, and that like was like the first initial boost for me that wow, like this feels good, and this is something that I can keep pursuing. So long story short, after that, like I kept on going along that journey. I kept on like revising my coding skill. I landed on a programming language that I loved, Rust, and kept on finding like Rust based projects that are out there in Bitcoin. And my main interest was like trying to do something meaningful in the space, like trying to contribute somewhere. I didn't know what I could do other than talking about Bitcoin, but the way of the coding way gave me the opportunity to do something like concrete and like create something and help some projects out there. And then 2021, Spiral gave me the offer of like getting into full-time Bitcoin with this grant program. They needed a Rust developer for BDK and other open source project, and that was like the break that I was looking for to fully jump ship from my previous career to Bitcoin full-time. And I spent this few days thinking about it, because I don't have any background in software development or tech. I never thought of like being into tech. That was never part of my career plan. And being here kind of like also means like I have to like throw away all the credentials and like the avenue of going back into my previous career. But I was like fully okay with it, and made the leap and made the jump. And then like the journey started of like meeting people, finding new ideas, finding my place into Bitcoin, what I can do, where I can contribute most, and it
Okay.
has been amazing so far.
Sorry to interject. A couple follow-up questions on that. What
Mhm.
did your employer say when you submitted your resignation?
They asked why. I
Mhm.
just said like I just said like I don't want to, I have other plans.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And I guess they have to accept it, right? What are they gonna do? You
Yeah,
know,
what are they gonna do? They have
well,
to accept that. Yeah.
you don't live in like China, and China be like, nope, you can't leave,
Oh, okay. That will be like so sad.
right? Because like in China, if you're a state-owned enterprise employee, I
Hmm.
think their obligations were, yeah, you're if they don't let you leave, you're not gonna leave.
Oh my God.
But
Okay.
yeah, anyway, well, then we don't want to get into the whole
Yeah.
socialism versus
Yeah.
democracy thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that aside, that's another rabbit hole, maybe another
Yeah.
show.
Yep. Totally.
Okay, second follow-up question. Did again, you mentioned that again, looking at your journey, 2019 learning how to code, 2020, first contribution, and then jumping, head first into development with the Spiral grant. Was it
Yeah.
like an advantage, or I don't know, because what I know that you probably went in thinking it was a disadvantage because you didn't have software development experience, right? All these things, all these new terms, the
Mm-hmm.
sprints, the scrums, the
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the process, the link up,
Yeah.
the open source communication tools and all of that.
Yeah.
And but from an engineering perspective and going in, with your background, since you can see it from, you're not constrained by, let's say, your education in software engineering. Was
Mm-hmm.
it helpful where you can look at it with a fresh pair of eyes? I mean, because sometimes, people tend to think, okay, I'm at a disadvantage, but looking at the pace and your speed, I'm wondering, you know, so I'm asking the guy who just did it or is doing it.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say like it's actually an advantage. Depending on like what I wanted to do. So um my previous background, not only in my civil engineering background, but I was like also interested in college days a lot into politics, kind of like socialism. And the place I'm from is the eastern India, and eastern India's this region is like very famous for the communist movement.
Yeah,
And
quite left,
like,
right?
yeah, the left. Yeah. So like that was a catastrophe at the end. It crumbled down, and the whole regime kind of crumbled down when I was like getting into my engineering college. Like my first year of engineering college was when that thing was happening. So I was exposed to different political ideas and saw them crumbling at the same time, and like had these kind of questions, political questions. And it's actually like those questions that got me interested into Bitcoin in the first place, not the coding. The coding is something that I figured out that I could do to be in the space meaningfully. But the reason I wanted to be in the space is like the way this technology is answering certain political questions that I was asking to myself. And um, being from a non-developer background into a development world is kind of like daunting, kind of like feels a lot scary, to be honest here. And at the start you don't know what to do, you don't know how to do, even if you know what to do. And the process is like you are always learning new things, you are always on your toes. Sometimes you have the imposter syndrome, sometimes you have the confidence that you might not want to be able to do it. But like because I approached via the open source community, that actually made the process much easier. Instead, if I just if I would have like went with the traditional technical world, like I'm working as a professional software developer in an office and making a product, it would have been like much more challenging for me to do it without a proper background and the training. But because I was in open source world and open source development works quite differently. And I see that in the new people who are coming from the actual training of software development, and when they usually land in a corporate job which is like very maintained, very coordinated, you have a manager, you have your team lead, you have your assignment, and your job is to just sit in front of the screen and figure out what to do, how to do what to do. In open source it's not like that. In open source it's like you are sailing your own ship. There is no guidance, there is no one party who can like who is like telling you what to do all the time. You have to figure out what to do, you have to figure out where you are most valuable, you have to figure out how to make communication with other people who are like also like working quite independently. And this form of communication, this form of approach is very different from what students and entrants see in the traditional technical world. And the thing about this is like, this is not even about coding, this is not even about software or computers. It's a soft skill that you kind of like have to go along and learn in your like journey of life. And that I actually learned through my office job. It's kind of like the same thing, bit different in other ways because it's a corporate setup, but the soft skill remains the same. So I would say like, yeah, it definitely had an advantage the way I came into this space, because I could see things ad hocly. At the same time, I always knew like I wanted to be more than just a developer. um and and coming from a multidisciplinary background in that way, kind of like allowed me to understand what I want to do and how I should do it, which led to all the projects that I'm working on right now. And so yeah, it was more chaotic than a regular software engineer journey, but it was a journey that perfectly suited me.
Right. Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that is from personal experience and also talking to, devs, whether core devs or developers on other, different layers. I always hear comments, maybe always is a hyperbole, but I've heard enough comments about some of the best developers are the ones that are self-taught, because generally speaking, they had to sort of find their way, and they weren't given the rules imposed on them, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe as let's say analogy to that, same thing. I mean, we've talked before. I came from the corporate finance world, so maybe about 15 years in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best, most talented corporate finance guys, investment bankers, whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want to call them, I've met, are people that weren't trained, weren't educated in finance. And they were, let's say, history majors, political science majors,
Right.
English majors, stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
where the soft skills really come in, and
Mm-hmm.
one thing you do notice is that as you transition from the role of, let's say, the doer, to like a manager or a project lead,
Mm-hmm.
that's the transitioning of that skills is very apparent. You could be like the most technical guy, but if you can't get people to understand what they need to do, when they need to do it, and why they're doing it, it's screwed. Might as well
Yeah.
just go back and just keep writing code, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like yeah, that's definitely there. And in a general, like if there are like young developers listening to this, like even if you were trained like like in a structured way, maybe you went to college or something, that doesn't make you a good developer actually. Like whatever your path is and wherever you are going, you have to be self-taught in one form or other. If you can't self teach yourself, you are not going to survive in the software development world. And eventually, like that's true for every trade in life. Like
Yep.
every real trade that people get good at, they actually get good at by doing it over and over again. I call it the street scale. And the other part is like the classroom skills. The classroom skills works for a certain period of time in your life. Like after you're 25, 26, most of the classroom skills are not going to work for you. What's going to work for you are the street skills. And to get the street skills, you have to go out in the street, right? And that can be applied for development, that can be applied for like creating business, project management, and all these kind of things. So yeah, that's true. And the good and interesting part of like software and writing code is like, that's probably the most impactful skill that is available in the world right now, that can be fully self-taught. Like you actually don't need a degree to be a kick-ass software developer. You will have all the knowledge you need just from the internet. It just requires the patience, the passion, and the want to do it. And if anybody wants it bad enough, they can do it.
Yeah.
So
The
that
proof of
that's
work.
like the yeah, sorry.
I said the proof of work. aspect of that, right?
Yeah, the proof of work
Not unlike
prospect of,
Bitcoin.
but also like another way, like say there are certain skills that there are certain things like traits that you cannot be self-taught with. For example, you cannot be a self-taught civil engineer and design an oil and gas platform out there. You can in theory, but the trait of that skills kind of like demands you to have the professional training. Same thing with doctors, right? You cannot be a self-taught doctor and like perform surgery. Like you can in theory, but the trait of the skills or the industry of that thing, whole subject is guided over this training part, like the formal training part, very heavily. Whereas in software, nobody cares where you came from. Nobody cares what's your degree. Nobody cares how much your grade was. Nobody cares like how you were trained. All they care about, can you write the code? And if you can write the code, then the product works, and that's good enough. And that's the very low barrier to entry. And that's why it was possible for me to get into this field without having a background. I couldn't have done it in my civil engineering career. I couldn't have done it as a lawyer. I couldn't have done it as a doctor. But as a developer, that's totally doable.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so again, all you folks out there, that's a very concrete example. If you really want to do it, you can. You can learn a code in 1 year, and the next year you can be a contributor. The year after that, you can get a spiral grant. Okay? Cool, man. Very inspiring. All right, Raj. So sort of, moving on to sort of maybe our final question on this, because I think we got a very full scope of your personal journey, where you come from, and we want to jump right into what you've been working on.
Yeah.
But on this last question for this section, maybe another quirky question, maybe not. Has Bitcoin already won, Raj? Should we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
really
Yeah, kind of like
say
it's
more
a
about
matter
that?
of time until we realize it, until the world realizes it. Like it's the same question of asking, has life already won? And yeah, it exists. It's gonna exist forever in no matter what form or shape.
Well, okay. Sorry, I'm gonna interject and get existential. Has life already won? I wonder, because the part of life, that completes the circle is death. So actually,
Mhm.
life has won, but it also loses every time in a perfect manner.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
It's
wonder,
like a
is that
it's
what we have to
actually
look forward to
that's a good
Bitcoin?
point. That's a good
Is
point, and it
Bitcoin
has
gonna
a
die
parallel
then?
with Bitcoin.
Okay.
It has a parallel with Bitcoin.
Explain.
Like you can think of it as the way the code and the protocol evolves. Like think about like the code that were residing in Bitcoin version 0.9. Some of those codes are dead now. Some of those codes got replaced by some other code. And this generation and death of code is not only fundamental to Bitcoin, but in general to any software. And in a sense, like that cycle kind of repeats over here. What sticks is the idea of the code. And what even like a single organism in the life in the nature dies, the whole species remains. The idea of the species remains, and the idea of the species also change, what we call as evolution. And the process of evolution is basically some part of the code in the DNA got replaced by something else. And the same thing happens for software. The same thing's happening for Bitcoin. What like to answer it better, I think like we need to frame what do we mean by Bitcoin, and it's not as easy as it seemed to answer. Like, and in this context, what can be meant by Bitcoin is this idea that defines an item in the digital realm which has some properties that are known as sound money or hard money properties. And it's basically a pure idea. And as human history suggests, the idea, like history of the monetary evolution and the history of humanity suggests, like humans has an inherent need of having a coherent and constant definition of this kind of money. And this need has came up over the society over and over and over again, until the society boil down and fall back on a material, on an atom where they somehow manifested the highest stock to flow ratio. And why stock to flow ratio is important? Because apparently that's the ratio that governs the hard money characteristics of any item. And gold won because gold eventually reached that high stock to flow ratio. And once you reach a threshold number, no other material can actually come and replace it. It's like kind of like get set in the stone. So it's the same question as asking, has gold own as a physical hard money definition? Yeah, it has. You can't change it ever, because you cannot like undo all the gold mining that has been happened over thousands of years. That gold is existing. So now you have a situation of like very high stock to flow of an item that cannot be replaced with something else. Now there can be an argument about the asteroid mining or a gold asteroid hitting us, and the stock to flow ratio.
The other argument could also be that, Bitcoin as a software protocol has existed for 14 plus years, as opposed to
Right.
go establishing itself over centuries before it became well accepted, and over, thousands of years when it became hard money, right? So
yeah, and here's a fun fact. Bitcoin's stock to flow ratio is mathematically higher than gold right now.
Yep.
Right.
That's
So
why we're
it has
Bitcoiners. Sure.
surpassed gold, and this has never happened in human history. This has
Hey, you don't have to
literally never
orange pill
happened
me,
in
brother.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But okay, so Bitcoin. So what does it mean though? You said that Bitcoin, your answer was Bitcoin is on its way to winning. Was that your answer, or you just definitively say yes, Bitcoin won already? I didn't
think
quite.
it depends on what do you mean by on its way. So that's where like the definition of Bitcoin comes in. If you think of Bitcoin as a payment mechanism that is like giving individuals sovereignty, control, privacy, at the same time lightning fast payment, no, Bitcoin isn't there.
Mhm.
Are you talking about onboarding all the 8 billion people on earth and giving them one UTXO each? No,
Mhm.
Bitcoin isn't there. Are you talking about creating a definition of a monetary system that can preserve its value and be uncorruptible at the same time, and keep existing at the same time, be digital, so that it can be thrown around the world across communication channel? Yep, Bitcoin is already there, and it has owned and nailed that game.
Cool.
So depending on what you define as Bitcoin or what you want Bitcoin to do, the answer varies. But on the basic layer, the conception of Bitcoin as its existence as a hardest digital money humans have
Right.
ever seen, it has already owned.
So on like the base layer, layer one, Bitcoin has won in terms of what it's set out to do, and the security and the cryptography and the proof of work behind it. But in terms of the thing people like to call hyper Bitcoinization, where everybody spends, saves, and transact in Bitcoin, that's a ways away, and will
Right.
presumably be up for many fights to come, I think, right?
Yeah.
Ending with the
It
US
can
dollar.
even be a forever long movement. Like it can as well, the transition phase can as well last for 150 years. Even like the transition phase will be different in different geographic location. Certain types of geopolitical domains will accept this transition faster than others. So we will have a heterogeneity of like phases of this hyper Bitcoinization, or however you want to term it, that world. It's going to take some time for us to get there, and there is a lot of work along the way. It's not at all done in that sense. There's so much things to do.
Cool. All right. Sarvan, did you have something before we jump on to the next section?
No, we can jump to the other section.
All right. Okay. Now that we know who Raj is and what drives you, talk a little bit about, some of the projects you've been working on over the past, well, since 2020, I guess, right? Beginning with BDK, and then more recently into Bitshala.
Right.
And then after that, we'll dig deeper into sort of the Bitshala initiative and where you guys are headed.
Totally. Yeah. So after I started full time, I the proposal from the proposal from Spiral was like to be a valuable open source contributor, and I had my fingers into multiple open source project Rust based. BDK was one of the major one. BDK is an amazing library that is the Bitcoin development kit. It is a wallet library that can be used to create a miniscript based wallet very easily by any application developer. And this tool is very much needed in order for to create the next generation of Bitcoin wallet where miniscript will be a very big part of the deal. And the way to work with miniscript is kind of complex. So BDK basically does the engineering heavy burden or load carrying of like maintaining all the things that it needs to maintain in order to work with miniscripts, and give developers a library that they can use. So that's an awesome project I have been working on 2 years. I'm still like contributing into that in some of my capacity. And then there was another project I was interested in, and I'm planning to like ramp it up soon again. Is the project called CoinSwap? It's a protocol, a very old protocol, 2013. At the same time, CoinJoins was developed and by the same guy, Greg Maxwell. And but this protocol was quite complex to implement in terms of like coin joins and stuff. So it never got implemented. In 2019, Chris Belcher started this project of implementing a coin swap in Rust, and I was helping Chris on like getting housekeeping and basic stuffs done over there. By last year, Chris Belcher has to like move away from the project to other stuffs, so the project is kind of still, and I'm planning to take it up. So I'm also like looking for Rust developers out there right now who is interested in Bitcoin privacy, creating a very cool layer one protocol, all written in Rust, packaged in a library format that can be deployed into Umbrel or Cypher nodes or stuffs like that, and then packaged back in a mobile client that people can use to swap coins. And that's have a very strong privacy preserving properties at layer one.
Yeah.
So that's a
Hey,
very
just a quick interjection there. You know that our Genesis cohort of Bob residency, the we got sort of three guys who are all sort of privacy focused projects, right? You have the Cashew eCash,
mm-hmm,
you have PayJoin,
mm-hmm,
and we have Joinster, which is CoinJoin Nostr. So,
right.
whenever you get here and or just even online, yeah, love to connect you with those
Yep,
guys, swap some
yep.
ideas, because definitely what I see in terms of probably the most overlap would be with Dan's project PayJoin, because he's
Mm-hmm.
working heavily on that, trying to implement it in as many of the platforms as possible. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
something you guys
yeah.
can exchange ideas on.
Totally, totally. There are ways of like overlapping CoinSwap with PayJoin, and yeah, that will be like super cool. I like already planning on like getting there, but right now we are like need to like finalize the code and like polish it a lot and make the full implementation, at least the full prototype ready. And
Right.
but definitely like getting including like other parts of privacy preserving thing inside one protocol is like always interesting, because there is no one single protocol that is like rules all privacy. You
Yeah,
kind of
that's
like
no
have
holy
trade-offs.
grail, right? That's what
Yeah, there
people
is
are
no holy
trying.
grail. Yeah.
I guess the one that at least Giacomo was saying that is the closest to it was like join market. But
Mm-hmm.
with join market, the UX of that and the
Yeah,
fact that it
yeah.
always needs to be on Tor, it's just that's some
That's
reliability
exactly
issues.
like I plan to solve with the CoinSwap, because CoinSwap also needs to work with a join market
Right.
kind of thing. And Chris Belcher was basically the designer of join market. He has been working on like
Right.
maintaining join market before working on CoinSwap.
Yep.
So the plan is like CoinSwap will also has to implement something like a join market, but the marketplace can be built on Nostr now. Like
Yeah.
that's can be like super cool.
That's where
And
Floppy can jump in.
yep, yep, yep. So all these things can come together and like really create an amazing, awesome layer one protocol with a good UI UX wallet that people can use to preserve privacy. And
Mhm.
and that will be something super awesome.
Yeah, nice. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Sorry, keep going. You were
Yep. This
yeah,
was useful
at,
information. This was
right,
very
right.
useful
Yeah, I
information
just
for me.
want to
Thank
jump
you.
in before I forget about it. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm taking notes. Like, man, we got like now like 3 things to talk about at length now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, keep
Yeah.
going, sir.
Okay. So yeah, so the next project that I'm very much interested and passionate about right now is building Bitshala. And the Bitshala is, in simple terms, it's a Bitcoin developer training academy, but it's not actually an academy. It's kind of like a community. And behind that, and the vision of that community is like providing the upcoming developers, both starting new and experienced developers, a space for them to explore around Bitcoin, explore around Bitcoin development content. At the same time, the organization is like focused on creating Bitcoin developer centric resources. So this idea I have been pondering about since almost like 2020, since I started getting into the field. Like when I started my journey, I had the feeling once is like, damn, there definitely should be a course or cohort like that, like where I can like enroll and like get through the Bitcoin journey and learn the stuffs that I need to learn. Because when you start off, you generally don't know what you need to learn. And the nature of the field is so multidisciplinary that when you start off, you figure out like, okay, now you don't know cryptography, now you don't know a bit of economics, now you don't know a bit of C++ and all these things. So where do you start from? So with this idea got consolidated around last year, um, when summer of Bitcoin happened, that gave me the biggest boost that, okay, like there are like young people flowing into the development space, but it requires more than just an internship program to get through into Bitcoin development. And there are like many people who are experienced, who are not student anymore. They cannot join a student internship program. So something needs to exist for them. So we came together. Adi was also part of the initial conversation, and few of us came together and say like, let's do it. We didn't know how to like make a make a sustainable business model out of it or how to monetize it, but at some point we're like, we don't care, like we can sustain it ourselves, we had the brain power, we have the hands, we don't need a lot of money to do it, so let's just make it exist and see where it goes. So that's what Bitshala is. The name suggests it's a pathshala for Bitcoin. And for people don't know, pathshala is like an Hindi word for schools. Like in early days, in ancient days, they used to have like small schools in the villages, and like they have students trains around 20-30 people, one or two teachers. One teacher would tell about many things, many subjects, and they would call that pathshala. It's a very primary and primitive form of education, and we wanted to like
Like
maintain
a
that,
community, like a
like a
community-based school.
community,
Right.
yeah, like
Okay.
a community based school,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that happens in a one single village. So every village will have their own pathshala.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's Bitshala, a pathshala for Bitcoin. And we just got started. We did our first cohort, and we have like multiple different programs, not just only one single one, because the as we go along we realize like the way to do this is not to focus on like one single program. It's the same thing about like privacy. It's like there is no one holy grail of Bitcoin education. You kind of need stuffs from different genres of different scales. So we came up with few different program ideas. One of the biggest one of that is the cohort. The cohort is basically, if you have done the chain code cohort or Kala Dev cohort or somewhere else, it's like the self-study group where we take up one book, we take up one literature, and we go through it over the weeks. And people are supposed to study up on their own themselves. There is no lecture series. Nobody teaches you anything. You are supposed to study and come up with the questions. And as you come up with the question, then there are technical and experts who are there to answer your questions. And over in this activity, they cover the book they learn few things, and they also come like make friends along the way. Like you get to know who are the other people who are joining in the space, who are going the same journey, share ideas with them. Then what happens is like, what was the most interesting thing happened after our first cohort is like, many of the people in the cohort, they kind of like started their own cohort, and they gather up in 2 3 groups and say like, hey, we are interested to cover this particular topic, and do the same thing, like weekly show up every day, they run a chapter and discuss among themselves.
So they're
So
starting their own pakshalas, right?
yeah,
Basically.
they're starting
Yeah.
their own parshala. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's the whole point, that you don't actually need us to learn Bitcoin. We are only there to hold you, we are only there to guide you and show you the path, but you can find out the path yourself, you can make your own path, and you can do the journey. And then we have some other programs. Another one is the Bitcoin Core Review Club. It's got inspired from the Bitcoin IRC Review Club, where we take one single PR each week and go through the PR process, go through the review process of reviewing the PR. It's a bit technical heavy. It's not for beginners or like somebody who isn't like interested into getting deep down into C++ and Python and Bitcoin protocol and all stuffs. But for people who are interested and passionate about it, that's almost like the very easiest way to get into the Bitcoin core code base. And it often sounds daunting to people to look around Bitcoin code base. It's so huge, it's so vast, there are like so many concepts going around that they don't know where to start. But actually it's not that hard. Actually it's actually very simple. And the way to understand this is like to join a review club, either our the IRC review club or the Bitshala like online review club. And the idea behind our review club is like, this is structured more around easy conceptual flow than hardcore technical discussion. What happens in IRC is like, it's very hardcore technical discussion. So if you are new, chances are that you will get lost midway on the conversation. But here we keep the discussion very lucid and very flowing, and discuss over the overall concept. Sometimes we look inside the code, how that concept got implemented. But if we go along this concept by concept basis and take the whole chunk of the code base and break it into parts, then we can understand each and different parts separately. And once you go through that process, it's actually not that daunting. It's quite fun and quite easy. And if you are just a starting C++ or Python, then it's absolutely possible for you to do it.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. You're kind of like training people like on the more technical end to actually see what it is like to go through a pull request and to respond to it, you know, if they have
Yeah.
the skills, right?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. And you can check our YouTube channel. We have a publication of those videos. Some of the videos, not all of them. Some of them are in the editing process, but we also record that session and publish it out in YouTube. So you can get a test of it before joining in. If you're inconfident, like you're too scared, you don't know what to ask, you don't know what to say, just check our YouTube videos and you'll see like it's a lot of fun than a serious discussion. It's also serious at the same time, but you can follow along.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Apart from that, we are like creating video content. We have our YouTube channel hosts all those video contents that we're creating. We have a show called Bitcoin Talks, which is about the people of Bitcoin. Like we talk about their journey, how they started, how they got into a Bitcoin career, what kind of project they are working in. Then we have a series called Bitcoin Deep Dive. It hasn't published yet, it's in production, where me and another technical guy sits with one single Bitcoin concept and we dig down into it in a presentation format, kind of like a classroom, and we dig down into that concept and produce that video. There are many
Is it
other
like
like
sorry, that one, is it like Bitcoin Explained? Have you heard that one? With Stores,
yeah,
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 that's
yeah,
where
yeah.
each episode
It's
is a
like,
technical topic, you know,
yeah.
pretty much.
Each
Yeah.
episode is a
Okay.
technical topic. Yep, like
Right.
that.
Cool. Okay. Nice. Well, actually, I fully support it. I think we need more. Because the thing is, each, let's say, person, developer has a different way of explaining things, right? And I'm really curious to sort of hear from your angle, because you're probably explaining it from an engineering perspective where layman can probably understand it, you know, in a more concrete manner.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to that. All right.
So
Very
so
nice.
that's the nature of like Bitcoin education in general. Like also like different developers consume content in different formats. Some are like more familiar or comfortable with audio. Some are comfortable with video. Some are comfortable with like going through the document and reading. Some are comfortable with just playing around. And yeah, so we have a Discord. So we recently thought about like creating a community around this whole initiative. So it's not just a course that you can join in, but it's also a community of people who are just there 24/7, and community of developers, Bitcoin developers basically. So and we have like few small activities over there. We have a weekly optic reading club session. We are planning on creating like more bit dev kind of like reading session over there. We have a plan to go and have a reading session and a discussion session around ARC and stuffs like that. So there are activities that are going on around the community. If somebody from the viewers are interested, you can drop in into our Discord server. Everything is public, everything is open, and that's how we intend to do this whole thing. Everything has to be in open source and available for everybody.
Right. Okay. How big is the Bitshala core team? I mean, you're the lead. I guess the other folks, you would call them counselors or instructors, or what would you call them? The guys who work with you, and how many, I guess?
So the Bitshala team is like kind of very dynamic, and we are also like constantly adding new member to the team as we are finding people who are interested and motivated around this kind of journey. So the team is around like 6 to 7 people.
Okay.
Different people are handling different stuffs. Some people are handling the technical part, some people are handling communication, some people are handling networking, business leads, and all these kind of things. But yeah, it's a team of 6 to 7 people. I think like our website has the core team is around 6 people right now. And but at the same time, the team is very dynamic. We are like constantly looking for new people to join our technical task force. And yeah, that's about it. And then we have other officials. We have some hires from the market to do the web development, do the designing, do the marketing, and all these stuffs.
So again, these are very, dynamic and useful projects in terms of what Bitshala is teaching people. And I suppose everybody that's contributing time, you guys are basically donating time in order to educate, right?
Right.
What's the future for Bitshala? You're gonna try to make it into like a company monetization tool, sell educational materials, or you just want to keep it fully open source and then, just have somebody keep volunteering and taking over and make it that initiative? What's the path?
So we had a conversation around that, and we are going for the fully open source model. It's harder that way. It's hard to find business model. At the same time, that's like the right way to do it. And the plan is like we create this education platform, and there are like ways to match values in the industries. There are a lot of like Bitcoin startups who are looking for like Bitcoin trained people trained in Bitcoin in some way or other. And the traditional computer science education system doesn't provide that, both technically and philosophically. And they are looking for people who are somehow exposed to the both technical and philosophical ideas of Bitcoin. And the problem we are trying to solve is like, how do you do that? A company doesn't have the resource or a bandwidth to train people on their own. At the same time, a Bitcoin startup is like a very small team, very focused team, motivated towards a mission. They generally don't want to hire from the market and get a tech guy and who just leaves for some higher package job in Google or Facebook or Amazon or some places. So our value proposition for the industry is we are an organization that are figuring out how to create and produce this kind of people, how to create the channel and the workflow and the pipeline where the companies can come and seek people from us. And that gives us a possible way of like fitting a revenue model over there. But I don't think that's a sustainable model. It can be a partial revenue model, but rest of the challenge has to be solved like the way we solve open source software granting problem challenge. We
Mhm.
basically plan to like look for grants and look for donations and look for community support on making the whole thing work. And over time we can come up with this combination of all these things together, and then can make it work.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I subscribe to that because as I was sort of thinking and you were describing Bitshala and the initiative, not so dissimilar to Bob, is
Mm-hmm,
that it is just an open source initiative that
mm-hmm.
if we do it well, it shouldn't rest on the beginning team, right? The founding team. It should be
Yeah.
something that as more people join in the open source movement,
Mm-hmm,
the stewards of it or the curators of it could change over time,
mm-hmm.
depending
Yeah,
on who's the best fit for that particular role at that
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
kind of, how what resonated with me as you were
Mm-hmm,
describing that.
mm-hmm.
So cool. All
Yeah,
right. Yeah, because when people ask me how to like monetize something like an open source, it's hard, man. It's
it's hard.
not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
A lot of it will be done through these, grants and developer sort of assistance.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part would be anything that can be monetized has to get to a certain scale. So
Right.
actually, the monetization doesn't come if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have users. And
Yeah,
Bitcoin users, proof of work, right? We're not going to
yeah.
pay for something unless it really, really works already. Because
Right.
you're messing with my UTXOs, man. I'm not going to fucking
Yeah,
pay you fees if
yeah,
this shit
yeah,
doesn't work. You see?
yeah,
So
yeah.
a
At the
lot of
same time
times,
you have the problem, at least for Bitshala we have the problem is like people willing to go into Bitcoin development space is always gonna be very very few and niche, so our user
right.
space and addressable market is also quite small. So that's why like trying to even monetize this thing in like market fit model or traditional business model will not work, because the addressable market is always going to be small. And there are people who made the argument like it's not going to be small forever, like like as Bitcoin and hyper Bitcoinization goes, people will come more and more. Some part of it is true, but some part of it is not, because being a Bitcoin developer means like you are not just being a developer, like you are already a developer, right? Somebody who is trained in professional development, they can get any job. You are interested into Bitcoin, that means like you are already intelligent enough, you are already smart, and you can land a pretty good job, and you probably already have a pretty good job out there. The reason people want to get into Bitcoin is for meaning and passion and mission, and that has always been a scarce resource in the market. If you create a product which is used for consumption, you have the highest addressable market out there, right? Because everybody consumes, that's the natural flow of human states. But if you create a product which is which is selling a mission, trying to sell a mission, you can't even sell a mission to people. People have to like take on that mission by themselves. So if your product is like dependent on like people choosing a mission, you are always going to be niche. So we started the project with the acceptance of this fact that we are always going to be niche, and that's why we didn't pay much attention on trying to even monetize it in the market sense, because it's always going to be niche. And if you the problem of forcing a market or forcing a monetization on a niche market is like, now what exactly you described, now you are like taking a lot of people's sats because your user space is low, so you need to charge more to pay the bills. And then you have to give a very good argument to people like why they are going to give up their UTXO for what you are doing. And here we face a major problem with Bitshala. You don't need us to learn Bitcoin at the start. You can learn Bitcoin on your own for free entirely on the internet. So our support has to like justify that high cost, and we said like we don't want to do that. Like, let's start like very ground up and just provide a support for free and see how many people comes in. And
Yeah.
we will figure out monetization and different ways of sustaining it along the way.
Yeah.
That's the plan,
That's
basically.
Dude, that's a good lesson. I mean, for anybody, the audience listening about starting out an open source projects, if you're worrying about sort of covering cost and all of that, you're doing it wrong. It just
Mhm.
means that, your focus should be on the end product, right?
Yeah.
How many students do you train? How many nodes do you help set up? That type of thing.
Right.
Because the
Right.
payoff becomes about those guys creating their own
Values
Bitshalas,
in their
right?
own ways. Yeah.
Right.
Right. That's the
So
value proposition of Bitshala, is like, we are going to provide the resources that will make people build the stuffs that they want to build. And that's like the final giving back to the community, is like, these people then gonna go out and do shit in the world.
okay.
And yeah.
All right. Now, okay, I'm gonna burst the bubble a little bit. So for anybody out there thinking that people who start these educational programs donate their time and all that, they're saints and all that stuff. Well, part of it is, yeah, but on the other part is people are already Bitcoiners, right?
Mhm.
Imagine you wouldn't have started Bitshala if you don't own any UTXOs at all,
Right.
correct? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually by contributing, and if the message gets spread and the mission gets strengthened,
Mhm.
then the whole network becomes stronger, which
Yeah.
means on a value basis, or whether you exchange it back for fiat or you spend it to buy something, your
Mhm.
sats become that much more valuable. So that's
Right.
that positive reinforcement feedback loop, correct?
Yes, that's
So I
actually
always try
very
to
beautiful.
remind myself that I'm fucking a selfish prick, but
Mhm.
I'm still doing Bob.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a anecdote that I heard or read somewhere like many years ago. Was like, in the early days when Bitcoin didn't had any value, or like very small value, there was no, it wasn't an industry back then. There were developers who were working on it. And one of those developer, around 2010, 2011, probably Ami Taki or somebody like that, mentioned that the reason that these developers work on Bitcoin is like, they have a lot of Bitcoin and they work on Bitcoin to make Bitcoin better. And that increases the adoption of Bitcoin, and that increases the price of Bitcoin, and that makes the number go up in the stack of their stash. So now their stash is valuable. So that's the beautiful feedback loop, as if like Bitcoin, the idea itself is incentivizing you to work on it. And the more you work on it, the idea starts paying you back almost inherently. Like the magic internet money, the value of the magic internet money in dollar terms goes up and up as more people make it better and better. So that's why if you have a lot of Bitcoin, the best thing you can do is like make it better. And if you have even some amount of Bitcoin, and if you even touch Bitcoin, the best thing you can do for your stash, being a very selfish prick, is to make it better. And that's the amazing beauty of Bitcoin. Bitcoin allows your selfishness to turn it into something better for the whole world. When was the last time this thing happened?
Yeah,
Or when
right.
was
It's
the
like,
last?
wait a minute. I get to do good by being selfish. God
Yeah,
damn, this is beautiful, right?
yeah, yeah,
You're right. Never in history.
yeah.
Uh, okay. Hey, maybe a couple more questions and then, we can start moving to wrap. But uh, as sort of you go through, as you see sort of students come through, right? Developers, and
Mhm,
and as you're a developer now yourself, getting to where you are, people contribute.
mhm,
Eventually, being an open source developer is very different, obviously, than a corporate job, because generally, if you're a good developer in Bitcoin, you don't work for anybody, man. You kind
mhm.
of work for yourself to
Yeah,
strengthen the protocol.
yeah.
And then you find, your counterparts to help you on that mission to strengthen that part of the protocol, correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
Do the students embrace that, or do you ever go through that of what being an open source developer ultimately is? Because yourself, same as me, same as Sovereign,
Mhm.
basically we work for basically ourselves to strengthen Bitcoin, right? We're
Mhm.
donating our time
Yeah.
to do it. So did they understand that? Because most of them, I guess, would generally out of college would want to go into a freaking Google, Apple, all that shit, right? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's like that has been like my major observation is like most college grads don't understand that part. Um, this generally is more common in experienced people, people who have already done their Google, IBM, Facebook shit, already made some money in the world, kind of like asking some harder questions about life, like what I'm doing, where the world is going, what does it all mean, why I am like constantly running for money, is there any other way of doing it? And these are the people generally who lands up in the open source world. This has historically always been the people in the open source world. Open source has never been for college grads. And the open source movement kind of started in 1965 uh, with the GNU project, and then it kicked off with 1997 with Linux, and Linus Torvald came up with Git, which uses the it is actually like the first ever real life application of blockchain. I don't know how all the computer science and all the entire tech industry misses this point. Like Bitcoin is not even the first application of blockchain. Git is, and that spawned the open source movement out there. And so the way of working in open source is like, as you said, is very different. You are not working for anybody. You are working for yourself and an idea. And how do you work for yourself an idea without a manager telling you what to do? Nobody knows. It's up to you to figure it out. And a lot of college grads face problem on this world. Um, Part of this problem can be solved by having open source project managers. Like if there is a PM for open source, then it's very easy for the PM to guide new contributors how to contribute into this particular code base. And that's how many of the open source project works. Like BTC Pay Server, BDK, LDK, they have their PM. So there are ways to make open source easier for new contributors, but open source inherently has always been for experienced people. And but at the same time, you enjoy this immense amount of freedom of work, flexibility, and the ideas to choose for where you are spending your time that you don't get in corporate. um, and that's something that many people enjoys a lot. So we do face this kind of questions. We have a resource list on also like how to navigate through open source, how to find projects in open source that you want to contribute, and then on the logistics of how to contribute. I was very surprised to see like many college grads, even from the best institutes in India and other places I know, is they don't know how to use Git, like how to use Git and how to use GitHub. And they just wrote their exams. They know how the operating system works. They know how the networking protocol works and the theories of networking protocol and all. But they find it like very hard to create a pull request in a project. So generally in Summer of Bitcoin, when I mentor people, that's their state. Like they have to go through few weeks of like learning and understanding Git and GitHub. And these are all parts of like being trained into Bitcoin development, because the entire Bitcoin development space is happening in open source. So you have to understand the ethos of open source, bit of like logistics and operation of open source, how to engage into open source communities, how to ask people questions. Like this is another thing that I have found in many cases, especially for young developers, is like uh, they are very quick in asking questions, like, and that's something like it's kind of like bit discouraged in the open source development world, because to answer somebody's question, somebody else has to spend some time, and they had bet like they are mostly like experienced people around the code base, and they have other important things to do. So when you are asking something very basic, then somebody who with a little bit of experience or around the knowledge or the context of the code base can very quickly understand like you haven't done your basic scouring. you haven't done your basic lookup in Google, or you haven't run your like basic struggle with the error message, or try to even understand the error message.
Right.
So
The young folks try to treat the experienced developers like ChatGPT.
yes, give me the quick answer, give me the quick
Yeah.
answer. Yeah, and that's
Right.
something like that is very discouraging in the Bitcoin space. You at least in Bitcoin you should not do that, because people inherently have a conception and sensibility for proof of work. Because we talk about proof of work, we think about proof of work, we do proof of work, we kind of also can see proof of work. So the first thing that we teach the men, like the interns and the students, is like, first do proof of work and then display your proof of work. If you have a question, only ask the question when you know, like, okay, this is a part of the question that you have tried to figure out in all possible ways, but you couldn't. And when you actually go and ask the question, the developer is actually interested in answering that question, because most of the cases, probably you have found something new. Probably you have found a bug that the guys who are coding it up wasn't thinking about. Probably you have found some missing documentation in API or something like that. It turns to be an useful question. So that's like in general, like the mindset a developer, whether young or experienced, needs to have in working in Bitcoin. Your job is to be useful, and it's your job to figure out how you can be useful.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm running out of questions here. Sovereign, you have anything else?
Right. So right now, Bitshala, how many members are you composed by when it comes to like advisors,
Sorry, can you
technical
repeat?
creators?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Can you repeat?
Yeah, the team of Bitshala, for how many members is composed right now?
Around 7 people.
7 people. Do you have any plans on expanding? Do you feel like you have the needs, you'd have like new roles to be filled up?
Eventually, yeah, not right now, because we basically, because we are like self-hosting the whole thing, like we are carrying the expenses. So all our team members are working in pro bono basis. We are only paying up for the services that we are hiring from the markets, and the team members are like there for their own reason. And eventually the idea is like we will be able to compensate with our times and our efforts when we have the grants and have the monetization probabilities. But we all are very cool at not getting paid while they're doing this thing. So yes, we want more people in the team, but at the same time, we don't have money to pay people to be in the team. So for now, we are quite settled. We are quite comfortable with the brains and the hands we have. But eventually, as we expand the program next year, as we create more structured program around it, we will like look for more hires, like proper hires who are going to get paid to do their services and putting their energy behind it.
I see. So right now, Bitshala is only an online academy, right? Any plans
Basically,
on
yeah.
making this a physical academy as well?
Yeah. I think I will let that to you guys to figure that story out.
Yeah, we got a space in Bangkok, as you know, and if you ever want to visit the north of Chiang Mai, we got
Yeah.
Captain Sid helping us there. So
Yeah.
whenever you guys want to
Yeah.
do a
Yeah.
get together of your devs and they ever want to make a trip,
Yeah.
you can do that for sure.
I can totally see like we can have like physical event from both Bob and Bitshala in a collaborative fashion. Bitshala probably doesn't need a physical space to operate right now, because it works entirely on online, and that's all it needs to do in order to produce what we are trying to produce. And so we will not be focusing on creating anything physical at any point soon, because that's a big operation and logistic and funding problem that we
I have an
don't
idea.
want. Okay.
The idea is kind of we'll experiment with it and see how it works out, because as you know, there's a Bitcoin conference here in mid-July, right? And we have some people flying in from various places.
Mhm.
And one of the events we're going to have right before the conference is something called Taiwan BitDevs on Tour. So Evan is involved in that.
Mhm.
You know,
Evan from BDK.
yes, you're Evan.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's involved in that. He's going to be down here doing a workshop.
Mhm.
So he's going to bring a couple people, Lewis and maybe someone else from their BitDevs. Koji, yeah, those three
Mhm.
and a couple other people. They're going to
Okay.
do a Taiwan BitDevs on tour. So
Okay.
that's one thing you can maybe do is you don't have to have a committed physical space, but
Mhm.
wherever you guys can gather, it doesn't have to be Bob, but it could be, or it could be anywhere else.
Right.
Bitcoin Park, anywhere where there's a
Right.
Bitcoin physical
Mhm.
space, you can just call it, Bitshala on tour. You see what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
basically
Totally.
people who are the ones running the space, we donate the physical space and we get our community involved and learn. You see?
Yeah, yeah, totally. That definitely sounds like a good idea, and we'll definitely plan on something like that. And I have already had a conversation with Jan about like how to do that and how to facilitate and all these things. So yeah, like definitely something like that. I'm not sure like we can pull something off for mid of July because we will have like sorry, is my voice very low?
Yeah, your mic went a little bit quiet.
Okay. How is it now?
Yeah, I mean, if you raise your voice a little bit, we're okay. I mean, we're towards the end, so it's fine.
Okay. Okay. I think, yeah, I have it at my max in my
Yeah.
hand.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
you're fine. Okay. All right. So for our last question, it's not really a question. We flipped the table on our guest, and we asked you if you would like to ask, Sovereign, myself, or Bob Space any questions. If not, we can just wrap.
Mm-hmm.
You have one question.
Actually, I had the question, I had some questions in mind, but I think we already discussed and covered it up. And some of the questions I had was like, how do you describe Bob Space? What is a Bob Space? And what is the vision of Bob Space? Another one was like why it is important to build a community and why it is important to focus on building communities when in many things like writing from open source development to creating products like education initiative, both Bitshala and what Bob is doing. I know the Bob community is quite large and you guys have been doing a fabulous job on maintaining it. And I had questions about upcoming activities, which I think you already covered with the upcoming conference in Thailand. So yeah, so
Right.
those will be the questions.
Okay, man, that's more than one question. I'll just pick one and answer that, and then Sovereign, you pick another one. uh, for me, it's important to build a community, especially around open source, is what we've been describing. Each person or each contributor that adds to the community makes the community stronger. It makes us aware of other aspects of the protocol that we may not be aware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like yourself, I don't know everything. I know what I know. And given certain deep background stuff, let's say in finance and things like that, I can bring that whole economic perspective to the table. At the same time, I'm really interested to hear more about the development, the technical side, going down that rabbit hole, and also learning more about political science and the different regimes around the world and how they feel about, uncensorable money. How are they going to react to it? So again, as a Bob community, I think we have probably like a dozen strong that sort of in and around the city, but we also generally have 3 4 5, maybe more maybe less each given sort of week that drop by that are sort of people transiting through, right? And when they transit through, the one thing that kind of always makes me a little bit surprises me is they come and then after a while they say, hey, we never realized that that's like a Bitcoin spot in Thailand. We thought it was all shitcoin and crypto. right? And that's
Yeah.
another big reason to do it, because
Yeah.
there are too many fucking projects out there paying marketing money for people to promote, whereas
Yeah.
the mission and the truth, you know, has to come from within, from Bitcoiners. So
Right.
that's why. Yeah.
Right. That's a powerful answer. Totally agreed and subscribe to that.
Yeah, from my side, I would say that we are learning by doing and also by being aware of our limitations, and especially what matters and what I personally trying to do. It's basically to bring Bitcoins together, since the only time when the best ideas come up. So that's why we are like focused on building up community by doing weekly meetups. And now we like the residency program where we're like trying to provide funding and resources to like Bitcoin developers by like bringing them together.
Right. Right. You guys are doing like fabulous job. I love the whole project, and it's absolutely important to have a space like that. Like it's also hard. I understand like how hard it is to like come and make sense of like a project that big and maintaining that space and just being there. And as Jim said, is like that's like the biggest magic of when it happens, like when you meet those people that they didn't realize like there is a space for Bitcoin conversation over there, and there are always people like that in the world who are looking for a space like that. So we are trying to create that space in digital space with Bitshala. You are trying to create that space with Bob space in physical format, and all of these initiatives needs to exist. And thank you guys for doing what you are doing. Really excited to meet you up over there soon.
Yeah. Appreciate the kind words, man. And my God, what you guys are doing, just nuts. And, you know, hope to sort of host one of the Bishala on tour one of these days. Oh,
Yeah.
one last thing, Raj. I sent you a message in DM, I think in Telegram, with a book called Working in Public. That's a good book for
Yeah.
introducing. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a great
Yeah,
book
I
on
did.
open
Yeah.
source. Yeah, it's a cool one, right?
It's amazing book on open source.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a definitely must read for people.
Yeah, for especially for the college grads that you're having
Mhm.
particular problem with getting
Yeah.
through in terms of
Yeah.
the soft aspects.
Yeah.
So
There's
anyway,
another book, like I just wanted to mention, if you can put also
please.
the link of in the show note for people. There is another book called the Cathedral and the Bazaar, and that's a book about building software in two different models: the Cathedral, the corporate model of building software, and the Bazaar, the open source model of building software. So that's also very enlightening and very useful resource in order to like understand the cultural difference of writing software in two different modes.
Cool. Would you mind just sending me like a link to
Yeah,
that
I'll
book
send
or
you the link.
something in our message, in our DMs? Yeah.
Totally.
Cool. All right. Nah, man, that was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, how time flies. All right, folks, that was fun. Thank you, Raj and Bishala. With that, it's a wrap.